I am so happy to be back with Pastor Rickey Howard from the Solid Rock Baptist Church out in St. George, beautiful Utah. I enjoyed it. Brother Howard is a tremendous blessing and a great friend. And so, brother, just say hello to the listeners.
Hello, and thank you for coming by. And I want to say again, thank you to Brother Gardner for allowing me to come on here and for having this conversation with me. And it's always good to talk to him. It's always good to talk to a friend, especially one you know that cares.
Well, I do care, and I love you, and I love every one of you listening because you know what? Our Lord loves you. You are his beloved. If you're a born again believer, you're his beloved. If you're not saved, he loves you already. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son. So I already know he loves you. Nobody ever loves God first. God
Right.
always loves first. We love him because he first loved us. And what I love about Rickey Howard's story is he has seen the mercy of the Lord.
Yes.
And so he has just, by the way, when I say that, every believer has seen the mercy of the Lord.
That's right.
Frankly, every lost person has seen the mercy of the Lord, or you'd be dead already and you'd have no more chances. So God loves you. And this is called Followed by Mercy because surely goodness and mercy do follow us all the days of our life. Now, I had the privilege of spending some time out in Brother Howard's home, and what a time to see how God is working and all that. We talked about that last time, just a little brief review. Why don't you just kind of bring them up? I know we talked a week ago, but people don't always watch every episode. And so kind of bring them up to speed about where you are and what you're doing, brother.
So we are we are church planners here in St. George, Utah. We've been here. We just celebrated back in January, celebrated 3 years with the church. This summer will be our 4-year anniversary of living here. And we've been here for, like I said, 4 years. And during the heat, our first time moving in was right in the middle of the summer. We moved in. This is amazing. I knew what the heat was like out here. It wasn't a surprise to me. But the day we moved in was 115 degrees. And
Lord,
my
help
wife's
me.
probably going to tell me
I
I'm
don't
not
think I could have
remembering.
took it.
Yeah, my wife's probably going to tell me I'm not remembering that right, but I remember it right because I was the first one here. So my father-in-law and I, we drove in through the night while they stayed in Gallup, New Mexico, and we moved in, woke up the next morning, and it was already 100 degrees by the time we got up. We did sleep in a little bit. We got up about 10 o'clock, but we got up and we didn't do much. We kind of fiddled around waiting on everybody to get there, but it was 115 degrees, 110, 115, somewhere there. And that was what we moved into. But we've been here. We've seen God move in wonderful ways. We've seen families fixed, not by our power, not by our abilities, but by the grace of God. We've seen families come back together. We've seen marriages fixed. We've seen people get back on track with their walk with the Lord. We've seen a number of people saved, and we can only thank God for it. There was a preacher in Alabama years ago, and I can't remember his exact slogan, but I want to say it was "Only God." And I can remember listening to his podcast years ago when I was sitting on a tractor. I was sitting on an excavator and digging ditches, and I'd listen to his preaching podcast, as much as I could. And I can remember every week he would say, "Only God." That's what we want to build our church off of. Only God, not of us, but only God. That's I've tried to bring that here as well, that everything we do, it ain't about what we do. It ain't about how great we are. It's only God. And I want to ask that he would do something great here, greater than I could ever imagine. And we've already seen it. And in this new little unit we're in is something greater than I could have imagined. We're still in the storefront, but it's still a blessing.
Well, it's beautiful. Well, I tell you what, we went over this before, but brother, would you kind of explain your early life before the age of 10, where you lived and what life was like? Because what we're wanting to do is help people who think, man, you don't understand how bad I've had it. Well, I don't mean to be rude when I say this, but you could top me, but it'd be hard to top Brother Rickey Howard and where he lived and what he had. And so, brother, would you just kind of tell them where God worked in your life and how it started out.
Well, and you know, I say this respectfully for what we're doing. I look back at it, and a lot of times, you know, I think about childhood, I think about growing up, I think about everything we went through, and yeah, you know, it was a there was a lot of rough times. It wasn't what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't desirable, right? But you know, in those times, you have two choices. You can sit and dwell on it, or you can make the best of it. I feel like for the most part, there was a certain time in life, maybe got into the teenage years or whatever, we just made the best of it. You know, we did what we could to stay gone as much as possible. But um, I don't. I hope you don't mind me saying this.
I don't
I
know.
I don't want to do this to sound like I'm boohooing. Does that make sense? I'm not.
That's right.
I'm not lamenting on what happened. I'm not, as you and I talked about, I'm not sitting here making myself a victim and talking about how I was victimized throughout life and woe is me. That's not what this is about. But um, going back, there's so much I could talk about, so much we could discuss. But you know, go back to before, let's say before 10 years old, before my dad died when I was 10. You know, it was I was, you know, I was born in 1983. I was born in Cartersville, Georgia. We lived in Adairsville, right there off Highway 41. Uh, we lived, for anybody that knows the area, especially back then, back in those times, on Highway 41. You come into town, there was McIntyre's Grocery, and then there was just to the north of McIntyre Grocery, which is now a Adairsville supermarket, or was a Adairsville supermarket, whatever you want to call it. You had McIntyre Grocery, and then my granddaddy had they called it a station. There wasn't any gas pumps there, but there was a station, and then our single wide trailer. And that's where I first come home to, and spent our early years there. And you know, I don't say this in any kind of prideful way, but I could write a book on just what I can remember in the 4 years of being there. And you could think, well, who can remember that? I honestly, there's a lot of memories I have, even in those early years right there, whether it be just right there in at that station, or at my aunt's house downtown. You know, later when we were there, going to my aunt's house, things like that. There's just so much that I can remember. I would say probably the painful parts of it are, you know, it was mainly my grandparents who were taking care of us. That my grandparents and my aunt who lived there in town, they were the ones caring for us. I don't have many memories of my mom, really no memories of my dad during that time. What memories I do have of my mom, you know, are probably not the most favorable, but I do, you know, most of them are my grandparents, you know, taking care of us and being there with us. Now, at some point through there, and I know we didn't talk about this on the last one, but sometime in there, I think I was about 4 years old. My dad's parents came to, and I say take us to the zoo is what the whole thing was. And in taking us to the zoo, we never went to the zoo. They picked us up, they packed us a bag, and they were supposed to take us to the zoo and an overnight stay in Atlanta or something like that. And we ended up somewhere else. I don't remember I don't know if it was immediately to Moultrie or what, but we ended up in South Georgia with them. And then over the next few years, all I can really remember is custody battle after custody battle for about 3 or 4 years. There was just before I turned 9, we came back to Adairsville to live with my grandparents there, and my mom and stepdad. All that, you know, through that time before I was 10, living with my grandparents in South Georgia. I talked about this a little bit, but during that time, I was fed a hatred for my mom, and I did. I'm gonna be honest with you. I spent a lot of my teen years up till, you know, later on, really with some resentment for my grandmother down there, even to the fact that I really don't remember much about her. because, she was hateful toward my family and my mom's side of the family and everything. And she tried to create resentment in my head and in our heads for my mom's side of the family. I don't know, but all of that being said, after all that time, every custody battle would end or wouldn't end, but every custody battle would lead to a different living situation. And during the trials, during the court dates, we'd have to go stay in these group homes, or I don't know what they're called, foster homes, state-run homes, and uh, those were horrible times. Those were horrible nights. Probably, if you want to talk about something that'll shape as you grow up, something that kind of shapes compassion for people who are in those long term, that really did. Because I can remember the days spending those. We were the only boys in the home that they would always send us to. It was all teenage girls, and then me and my brother when we'd go to those. But man, that was a mean home. The lady who run that place was a mean woman. I can remember some things, and she wouldn't let me and my brother sleep in the same bed. And my brother would cry, and I'd wait till she, turn the lights out, and I'd go and I'd lay with him till he got in the bed. But I knew she'd get on to us if I slept down there, so I'd stay awake till he was asleep, and then I'd sneak to my bed and go to sleep and things like that. But just all those different things. But I'll say, I feel like it's one of those. I'm in one of those times this morning where I'm staying on topic. Is I'm kind of scattered on my thoughts on it.
All right.
But yeah, leading up to 10 years old. At 10 years old, I was probably 8 when I found out my dad had cancer. He had a kidney removed. He was in prison at the time, and I don't know everything that went on. I know what I was told. I know all that, but my biggest memory of my dad, or really the only standing memories of my dad, are going down to, for some reason, Augusta's in my mind. I don't know where the prison was, but I know we'd get off the interstate, and we would take a road. I guess it was toward Augusta, and there's a prison over somewhere we'd go to. It took forever to get to when I was little, and we'd go in there, and we'd sit at a round table, and and that was about the only time he could have I don't know. He just acted like it was such a big deal to have a Coke and a pack of chips or a candy bar. And so we'd go and, we'd all have a Coke and candy bar. We'd draw pictures and all this stuff. And that's all I really knew of him until, they let him out of prison because some family members sat and wrote letters and said, you should let him out so he could spend the last few months with his kids and all this. And the sad part about it is, we had these high hopes and high dreams that, man, he's going to get out and he's going to be dad of the year and all this stuff. I barely saw him. I think probably the most time I spent with him was one overnight trip we took to Duluth, Georgia, to hang wallpaper at a new AT&T building. I was 10 years old. I was 9 years old, and he went to help his brother wallpaper the new AT&T building in Duluth. And, we were over there, and, we stayed overnight, did 2 days worth of work. And then we come back to Adairsville the next night and got caught in a tornado. We pulled over, a tornado come through, and we pulled over at a gas station. And that's the biggest memory I have of him. Probably he was and I can remember he was at one of my baseball games when I was that summer that he died. He was at a baseball game, only baseball game I can remember him being at. And I was so nervous him being there that every time I went on the field, I forgot my hat. And I'd get to second base running out to the outfield, and I'd have to turn around and go get my hat because I was so nervous every time. But I did hit 2 triples that game. I'll never forget that. But it was, very few memories. He did pass away 2 weeks after I turned 10. He passed away, and all my hopes and dreams of having this, picture perfect dad, sitcom dad, went out the door because I knew my stepdaddy, he'd never be it. I just knew he would never amount to that and never live up to it. So even though I tried to have a relationship with him, it just, I don't know. It's just one of those things. But that's
so you didn't know your mother hardly at all either.
Well, I knew her. When I came back to Adairsville at 8 years old, she she lived there on property, I'd say. You know, my granddaddy bought the house. It had a shop. He remodeled it and made a house out there because the only way we could come back to live there is if we were coming to live with her. She had to be there. It could be, I don't know the stipulations. I was too young to really know, but um, they wouldn't give custody to my grandparents. And because of my granddaddy's history as a moonshiner and things like that, and my grandmother's health, they wouldn't give them full custody. And so my mom had to be there. So he built a house. So from 8 years old till I moved out of the house, she was there. I knew her. We didn't have a close relationship at all.
Well, I just finished writing some articles about how we don't really remember our past. It's stories we tell ourselves because every time we tell it, we kind of think of something else or change something else or make ourselves a hero or make ourselves a victim. But one of the things that I would say you've done, and I just want you to help our listeners to see this, you had a rough upbringing, but you have turned it to the story of the glory of God. You have turned it to how God has worked in your life and how God has shown mercy because you've told me your story. That's why I'm asking you to tell it to these people. So
Yes,
kind of
sir.
give us a shift. How did you come out of all that mess and God changed the story?
Well, I have to leave a lot of me behind and a lot of things out to really tell that story. But, as I believe we may have already talked about this, I'm not sure. I know you and I talked about it, but, living there, we lived on the corner of Dogwood Circle and Franklin Street. And where our road, Dogwood Circle, where it met Franklin Street, is where Hotel Street ends. I know I'm giving this pinpoint location, but right there on that corner was the First Christian Church of Adairsville. And there lived, right there on the property, the parsonage there was Phil and Winnie McPherson, the pastor and his wife, and wonderful, wonderful people who really, it would take my brother and I, they took us in when things would go awry at the house. Fights would break out, police would show up, things like that. He was the first one to come down and just grab us kids by the hand, take us down to over to the church fellowship hall.
Praise the Lord.
Fix us a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And, I don't even know what the game is. Something with some pool balls. You throw down a long thing or set up the ping pong table or even sit there and give us coloring books and stuff and just sit there and talk to us. And we would go, he'd go play basketball with us, played baseball with us. He was that kind of in between. I had my granddad who, man, I had a morning routine with my granddaddy for so long. Me and my granddaddy would get up during the summer, we'd get up, we'd go eat breakfast. We'd go out, or even before I started school, like before going down to South Georgia, we'd get up, we'd go to the truck stop, Patty's truck stop for breakfast. We'd leave Patty's truck stop and we'd go down Hall Station Road. There was this old country store out there by Barnsley Gardens. And these old men would just sit around on rocking chairs and things and sit and talk. And the guy would put me up on this old whiskey barrel looking thing, from what I remember, or put me on this padded stool. And he'd give me give me a bottle of Coke, one of those glass bottle Cokes. And I always thought it was so cool popping the top off. And we'd stay there for a few hours. We'd go to the barbershop some days and, sit at the barbershop. Nobody'd ever get their haircut, just sit there. And some days we'd go and visit his sister, who lived behind that country store. And, we'd go over there, and it scared me to death. She had so many birds, scared me to death. I wouldn't get out of the truck. And then after that, we'd go out to the moonshine still. And, so I had my granddaddy who would, he was that. But Phil McPherson was kind of that stereotypical man that a guy needs in his life, if that makes sense. And so he would come out and he'd play ball with us. He'd play catch with us. And he was an old man and still had a lot of juice left in him, I guess. And I can remember going up there and talking with him, and he would sit there and he'd be working on the truck, and we'd look, hand me that right there and tell me what it is. And things like my granddaddy was a great mechanic. Moonshiner got to be a good mechanic, right? Because you gotta know how to soup your cars up. You got to know how to get your weight distribution, all that. My granddaddy and my stepdaddy, great mechanics. never taught me anything on how to work on a car because that was all business. So, Phil, Mr. McPherson, he taught me a little bit about tools and things like that. But I would say the turning point in my life, I would have to say there's multiple. There were those early years between like 12 and 15 where just different people, I would say between 10 and 15 really, because between the guy at who used to pick us up at Philadelphia Baptist Church, used to pick us up on the bus, Phil McPherson, who really, when I first moved into the house, came back to Adairsville at 8, started going to church up there, Sunday school, everything. Like he would walk me to Sunday school every morning. I thought that was so special. All these people, they got their moms and dads bringing them to Sunday school. The preacher's bringing me. You know what I mean? The preacher's bringing me to Sunday school. He's walking me to Sunday school. And then it got to be where the preacher's son, I can remember he started walking me, and his wife was our Sunday school teacher for years. There were so many things about that really kind of started shaping me. But I think it was, honestly, I think what really set me in and kind of, made me think about the rest of my life was the young couple who picked us up and took us to church to help them remodel the church. And this little non-denominational church there in Adairsville, they started up, probably in 98, somewhere in there, 98, I guess is when that was. And they probably sooner than that, probably about 96, 97. Well, I can't really, my mind, I'm thinking I was probably about 14, so probably 97. If I'm doing my math right. They started that church. We were hanging out at the pizza place downtown in the arcade or whatever, and probably skating around, on the sidewalks or whatever. And they pull up and they're like, "Hey, y'all want to come help us work on this church, get this church ready?" And, we're like, "You feed us?" And they're like, "Sure will." And we're like, "Yeah." So we jump in this van with, this 20-year-old couple. These days people would be like, "How dare you?" But, we were a bunch of teenagers. We had this idea that, there were 5 of us who stayed down. We were the ones that, we didn't really do a lot of bad stuff, but most parents wouldn't let the kids hang out with us. I guess it was just the image we put out. But that couple, they pulled up and we were the ones they wanted to talk to. And we knew, well, ain't nobody going to try no funny business. There's 5 of us. We'll whoop them, And so we wasn't scared of anything. But we went over there. We helped them paint, helped them set up chairs, helped them set up drum kit. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Set up the speakers and the drum kit and all that. And I got to play on the drums and the guitars and all that. And I just remember the Saturday we finished up, and they dropped us off at the house, and dropped us off at the house with a large pizza. And we thought we made it, and we get out at the house and they're like, "All right, we'll see y'all in the morning, 10 o'clock. And we're like, "Mm-mm." I'm thinking, "No, I'm good." And they're like, "No, man, you helped us get this church ready. You got to come see what it's about." And so that really talked us into going. And so we started going to church there, and about a year or so later, that's when the gospel became real to me. I don't know if this is on the other video, but during those times of going to church and everything, I thought, I joked around about it while we were out raising support, and I'd give my testimony. I joked around about it, but it's serious. I didn't go to church for any other reason, but I just wanted to get around normal people. I just wanted to get around people who had it together. It took me till probably in my 20s. Well, really my late teen years when I later on, we can talk about that if we need to, but when I realized, man, even church people ain't got it together. But, but I really just wanted to get around normal people. And that was the reason I went to church. And I thought, the gospel sounds great. God is a great, God's great, Jesus great, all this stuff is great. But if God loved me, then why am I here in this situation, in this stuff? I love my grandmother. I love my granddaddy. I even love my mom. I love my brothers. But why does it have to be? If God loved me, why does it have to be like this? Like, a lot of the preaching is you talk about our Father, our Father. I ain't even got one. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so that's where it took a while. I was 15 years old, and I guess it was just the simple preaching that had me understand God's love. But I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I can't really take you back and tell you everything that worked in my heart during that year. But I do know that summer of '99, before I ever turned 16. I do know that Y2K, all that stuff going on, the Kirk Cameron, what is it, Left Behind movie come out. Boy, I was scared. I was scared to death. And I thought, man, what if the world does end on January 1st? What if this? What if that? And so I was really under conviction. I can remember late night sitting up in my room, just like, what if? And I'd go and I'd get my grandmother's Bible and I'd look at it. And I don't even know what I'm looking at. Like, I don't even know, where do you find this? Where is this stuff at? I hear it preached. And I follow along in the preaching, but I just don't know. I can't put this all together. But it was amazing at 15 years old, walking to church one Sunday evening and just understanding, man, something's got to change. And it's amazing how God works. The preacher that night preached on the second, talk about God calling the church out. Like, well, if God calls the church out, are you going? And I can remember that question being asked, and I had to get up. I had to go. I had to go seek the truth that night. And that's the night that God saved me. Now, that was probably the night that night was probably about the time God started working in my heart, because really for the next couple of years, I was serious. I tried the Christian. I wanted to do everything I could to get as close to God as I could. Went and got a Bible. I left public school. I spent my first semester of freshman year in the Christian school. Actually, the second semester of my freshman year in the Christian school. It was a mistake. I wasn't mature enough for that, because I didn't have. If you're going to do a private school, or Christian school, something like that, you really need a family structure behind you to help you do it. I didn't have that.
Yeah.
And so I lost a whole year. I lost my whole freshman year. Well, half of my freshman year because of that. And I'm not mad at them for allowing me to come over or even presenting that to me. But I'm telling you, it's funny. It's really, I don't say this a lot. I don't tell a lot of people this, but I knew I knew then that God had something for me to do. I just didn't know what. I was never going to get up and speak in front of anybody. I was never going to get up and sing in front of anybody. I was never going to get up and preach. That was never it. But God had something for me to do. That was my mindset then. And I can remember talking to that preacher at the time and saying, I want to be part of the ministry, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to do what you do. That's hard. I mean, I'll do anything else, but that's hard. I ain't doing that. But here we are.
Well, I think that has been a most wonderful story. And I want to stop now, and we'll be right back with you tomorrow with more of the Rickey Howard story. But as you can see, maybe this field man didn't know what he was doing. He was just loving some kids that needed loving. And maybe what you're doing, wherever it is, a Sunday school class, people need to know the love of God. And we are the loved of God, so the loved love. And that's what seems to have touched Rickey Howard. So, brother, we'll start another podcast for the tomorrow, but what would you say is the last thing to encourage people? Because I'm hearing that just regular people is what God used for you.
Oh yeah, just regular people. And it's amazing for me. It wasn't the hardworking neighbor down the road who, or the hardworking war veteran down the road who taught me that, life can get hard, but life can always be better, and taught me this business sense or anything like that. It wasn't that. It wasn't even the, the other type of person. For some reason, for me, I praise the Lord for it. For some reason, for me, it was the bus captain at Philadelphia Baptist Church. It was Phil McPherson and his wife, who, the pastor at the Christian church. It was the non-denominational pastor and his wife, who would, take us into their home over the weekend so that we could eat and be ready for church and wouldn't have to go through the commotion on Saturday nights from people drinking and partying, and know that we could be in church. It was those people who had an influence on me. And why did I seek it out? I don't know. Why did it find me? Because of God's mercy and God's grace. That's why. Can I tell this real quick?
Yes, sir.
I think about this, and we have a young girl that we pick up on our church van here whenever we can. She just got saved a week ago yesterday. So we had April took her home. My wife took her home after Wednesday night service, and in the parking lot of their apartment complex led her to the Lord. But this is it. This is a young girl who is living a similar path to what I did. And I've watched my wife weep over this little girl, beg to go pick this little girl up, do anything she can to get this little girl around us in the church. And so the fact that this little girl is seeing the troubles that I've seen, a lot of the similar things she's dealt with. This little girl's been in homeless shelters, home to home, all these different things over the past 3 years, and still the happiest little girl when we see her. Loves to come into the church. She is probably one of the biggest reasons we do the Wednesday night ministry we do here for the kids. And I say that because I know it's not just me. I know it never was just me. I mean,
That's right.
I had brothers who were going through the same thing, but I have brothers who are not in the same place I'm at today. And I have friends who are going through similar things. Some are dead, some are in prison, and I tell my boys all the time, I got more dead friends than I should have at 42 years old. And that's I got more incarcerated old friends than I should have at 42 years old. And so you got to watch who you're with and what you do, but you can't help what you come up in and what you come up around. And so that being said, if my departure from this episode, I guess you'd say, is this: don't let current circumstances define you, because
that's great.
Current circumstances, if a current circumstance defines you, then you're always going to be locked in to that definition of you. And it's not preached this last night. It ain't about us. It's about Him. Amen. And the moment we stop defining ourselves on ourselves and start looking to Him and find our defining ourselves in Him, that's when we truly find out who we are and what we can be.
That is a wonderful way to end this. I want you to know your position, your hurt, your being abandoned, that's not you. It's not your identity. And you will find your identity in your Father, your Heavenly Father who loves you. And so Rickey Howard's success today is not something he does, because we need to always remember it is God who loved us first. It is God who sought us out. It is God that saved us. And to Him goes all the glory and all the praise. Well, you need to be back with us tomorrow, because we're coming back with more. Followed by mercy. That's the difference. Followed by mercy, because surely goodness and mercy that follow us all the days of our life pursues us and chases us like it did Rickey Howard. Thanks for being with us.